Good afternoon. Now I'd like to bring the regular afternoon meeting of Township Council to order. And the first item is adoption and receipt of the agenda items. I'd like to add, I want to add an item. I'll call it A2, and this will be discussion on the delegation request for the evening meeting. And also, there are two delegations for the afternoon that have been added. So, with that, it's been moved by Councillor Ferguson. Second, Councillor Davis. Any discussion? Councillor Richter.
Yeah. The item that you're wanting to add, delegation request, when are we discussing it now?
We'll discuss it as a separate item once the agenda is approved. So I've added it to the agenda to discuss.
Okay, so we're under other business?
No, it'll just be as A2.
Oh, it's
okay.
A2.
And, okay. And in the agenda, I've added the two afternoon delegations that are on table. Okay, so with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And A2, there's a delegation request in the afternoon. The evening by Mr. Ben Weens. I've read the request, and I would move that we decline his request based on the information that he's provided and the tone of the request. And we do have a procedural bylaw where we need to be respectful of our staff. So I'll move that is declined. In the evening, there's a delegation, one delegation, Mr. Ben Weens, in the evening meeting, and so that's sort of added as A2. So you just want to not here. So I'm moving that we decline the delegation request. So second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on A2 through the machine.
So in favor means he's not coming.
That's right. That carries unanimously. All right, and now a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular afternoon meeting of February 24th, moved by Councillor Kunst, second. Councillor Davis, discussion. Councillor Richter, any submissions?
I just had a question with regards to these additional delegations.
Oh, sure. Maybe we'll just deal with the minutes and I'll entertain your question.
Okay, thank you.
So all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Councillor Richter, question on the delegations?
Yes, I'd like to move that we decline these delegations. We've got reports in our package.
Okay. It's moved. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Woodward seconds. Discussion. I think for these, because they pertain to an item on the agenda, I would be accepting them. But the motion is to not hear them, so I'll call the question on that. And so that would be, what do I label that, Ms. Bauer?
We'll label it as A3, please.
A3, okay. Councillor Davis, did you? Okay, and that motion fails. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kunz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long, Councillor Arneson opposed. All right, so with that, a motion to resolve into special close for the items on the agenda and on table. Councillor Long, second. Seconder. Councillor Davis. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We now go into close. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. I'd like to reconvene the regular afternoon meeting of Township Council. And the next item on the agenda, there are no presentations, but we do have delegations, and we have a delegation here from Team Future X. And if your spokesperson, whoever wants to come forward, that would be great. Up to the mic here. Welcome here. So if you don't mind providing your names and whereabouts you live, just your neighborhood, and you'll have 5 minutes to present. You'll see the light flashing for this little box there. When the light goes solid red, you know your 5 minutes is up, and I'll just ask you to wrap up then, and then there may be some questions. So welcome here.
Hi, my name is Daniel, and I live in Walnut Grove.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Byungjin. I also live in Walnut Grove.
And Clara, and I live in Willoughby.
Welcome here.
And we are from Team Future X. Today we request your time we are competing in a competition called Idea X, which is hosted by the Langley School District. And it would be great if we could discuss about our idea for the project and receive some feedback. So here's a quick introduction of ourselves. We are a group of students from Walnut Grove Secondary School, and I'm currently in grade 10.
And I am in grade 10 as well.
And I'm a grade 11 student. We all share a passion to help the community and environment so Langley can have a brighter future.
Right, so what is Idea X? Idea X is a competition, and they have given us a challenge. First, we must pinpoint certain environmental aspects that need improvement in our city, and then we must design a future Langley envisioned in the next 50 years to fix these problems.
We have created a survey on what needs improvement in Langley, and we have received responses from several different age groups and areas. With this data, we were able to solidify our vision, so let us explain what it looks like to you.
Our team's vision is to create a sustainable, symbiotic relationship between our urban environment and agriculture. We will explain this later on in the presentation on how we plan to make our vision into reality. Additionally, from a survey, we were able to pinpoint some of our most popular topics that have gotten our attention.
Since climate change is such a huge topic today, a popular response was a common desire for a more eco-friendly city and environment. That means eliminating carbon-emitting cars, single-use plastics, switching to biodegradable products, and overall creating a sustainable city.
Secondly, we have analyzed that we do not have an adequate ratio between urban and suburban areas. We have noticed that some people want to preserve a natural environment while also incorporating new urban and renewable spaces. As shown from this, the young to middle generation wants more of an urban infrastructure and efficient transportation methods rather than having more of a suburban farms and old infrastructure that is limiting us from a more convenient lifestyle.
Thirdly, through our own research, we have come to the decision that the bylaws under Agricultural Land Reserve and urban boundaries, which were made in the 70s, need to be revised and remodeled. Due to these restrictions, Langley is unable to construct new infrastructures and spaces that are needed in the city.
From reflecting upon these observations, we have come up with our project idea, City X. Our theme is to build a smarter city.
So, as you mentioned before, one of Langley's bigger issues are its bylaws for urban boundaries and ALR. Because of these bylaws, not only are they restricting development in the Langley, but it is also preventing Langley from becoming the great city it can be. Therefore, to solve this problem in the next 50 years, we have decided that Langley needs to revise the bylaws on ALR and urban boundaries. We were hoping that Langley would reduce the amount of ALR and instead replace it with more infrastructures and communal spaces such as schools or recreational spaces such as schools and recreational centers, since in the next 50 years, we're going to have a much bigger population in our city. However, there is a catch. Obviously, it would be unwise for us to completely eliminate ALR, since in the next 50 years, we need more food to supply the town and people. Therefore, we were envisioning that the buildings replacing the ALR would have agriculture installed within them by using new technology such as vertical farming or roof farming. Therefore, we are envisioning a city where rather than having a large space of land dedicated to agriculture, would have pockets of ALR dispersed within the developed city and installed in houses.
In order to create sustainable houses, we have been inspired by the works of Singapore architects. We were fortunate enough to have a conference call with Mr. Jason Pomeroy, the master planner of the Idea House in Malaysia and Singapore, Asia's first carbon-neutral prototype home. Now, many people still have this misconception that green buildings are more expensive to build. However, Mr. Pomeroy changed this perception and proved that it could be the same amount or even less money to build compared to conventional homes. He proved this through his work on the Bee House, the first carbon-negative residence in Singapore. Significant savings are being made by the lower energy use and eventually allows for lower maintenance costs.
Lastly, I'm introducing the pivot. The pivot is considered one of our main ideas for this project. I guess my time is up.
Oh no, it's just flashing. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, we plan to build a new community near 232nd Street and the Fraser Highway. Recognize that we'll be expecting around 80,000 more people moving into Langley in the next 50 years, and we need a new community to serve all of these people. The reason why we chose this area is not only because this neighborhood is included in the ALR, but also because this is the official center of Langley geographically. Instead of just houses, we would like to build a central commercial area. This could mean things like shopping malls, theaters, restaurants, anything to make us enjoy living in Langley, that people would not have to drive all the way to Surrey or Abbotsford. We also want the pivot to be a rapid transit hub. If you look at the map, the pivot is the center of everything, in between the area of Walnut Grove and Alder Grove. The pivot is also very close to TW and Langley City, Murrayville, and etc. The pivot will serve as a rapid transit hub, enabling people from Alder Grove all the way to Walnut Grove transit efficiently without having to spend too much time. After our survey, we realized that most of our residents want green spaces to walk, bike or even walk with a dog. We are building a pivot while incorporating the nature and the natural resources we currently have in Langley. So what do you think of our idea? Please let us know.
Well, thank you very much for your great ideas. I like the idea of electric train. That's called SkyTrain. Hopefully we'll get it to Langley. But certainly appreciate your in-depth research and looking into the ALR boundaries and where we're building our homes and where we're building our rec centers. Metro Vancouver, certainly we work with Metro Vancouver, and they're undergoing a process of updating. It's called Metro 2050. So looking into the future and updating the plan that we have now, I would encourage you to go to Metro Vancouver's website and and have your input, because you raised some really good issues, some concerns. ALR land that could maybe be better utilized, and other land that could be better utilized to grow food with new technologies. So certainly very interesting, and what you talk about is what our planners are looking at all the time. So hopefully you're all going into a future in planning, city planning and urban design. So, but thank you very much. Councillor Davis has a question or a comment. Councillor Davis?
Thank you. This maybe isn't politically correct, but I'd like to correct the mayor. It's called, the electric train was the interurban.
That's right.
And it ran from Chilliwack all the way to Vancouver.
We're going to get a faster one now.
And my dad used to be able to get on it in the 40s. And he used to be able to get to Vancouver and watch a show for less than an hour. And at midnight, he could come back to Milner within an hour. And that was that long ago. So anyhow, when you talked about reducing ALR land, my first thing I thought of is my hair went up on my hair. I don't have any hair on my back. And I think it's really good to have new ideas. Technology plays a real important part in agriculture, but sometimes the cheapest part of agriculture is the topsoil that we have, and that I think we have to reserve. And but it really good to hear, and I hope you do well with your presentation to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Backen.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was an excellent presentation, but to help the students in their presentation, there's a couple things that they may want to address as part of their presentation, or their educators may think they were less than complete. We can't change the ALR boundaries unilaterally. It requires the Agricultural Land Commission to do so, and that's set up under the Agricultural Land Commission Act. It's in the provincial statutes, and it actually puts in the process and the implications of what a change would look like. And if we were able to convince those folks to change it, we still have another level of government, which is the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy, and that's available from Metro Vancouver. That also would have a role in changing any of those boundaries now effectively, because they view that as, the old term used to be green space, but it was now, I guess, rural land. So those two elements have to be considered in your application, or in terms of your report, because there's it's not just the municipality's decision on its own. There's these other two levels of bodies that are involved.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, and thank you. I mean, you guys have really been putting a lot of good thought into what you want Langley to look like in the future. I just wanted to add to Mr. Backen's comments about the role of Metro Vancouver. And of course, one of the things that Metro Vancouver does is it provides parks, because as we densify, which of course we all are, the parks become our backyards, because we don't have backyards anymore. So protecting the parks and making sure there is park space is really, really important. And if you go and look at Metro Vancouver's website, you'll find a report in there on the park strategy and how their vision is to protect the natural conservation areas, as well as connect people with those areas. So another piece for you to add to your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Just before we leave, I would like to add just one comment and maybe possibly one suggestion to all of our councillors and mayors. Please fix a two-way street. Please. And thank you.
We're working on it. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Good luck. Okay. So now we have our next delegation. I understand Mr. Campbell had to step out, and we have Stuart, I can't see the writing here, Hurcio, thank you, here to present.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just filling in for Brandon as he had to step out.
Okay.
His kids from daycare. But, I'm sure you guys are aware, I'm here to speak about the 2378 72nd Avenue potential fill site. I believe there's been a report to council from staff on this. And so just a bit of a history. We expect that this was a gravel extraction site from about the 1940s, potentially tied to the railway. And the proposal from our client, who is Owl Contracting, who Brandon works for, is to basically infill the gravel extraction area with import structural fill. And then there would be a capping layer for that for agricultural purposes. This is in the ALR. And at the end of the day, this site is destined or proposed to be used for like a small hobby farm agricultural use. So the total volume we expect is about 30,000 cubic meters to fill in the existing hole. And Braun Geotechnical, who I work for, have prepared fill plans and as well as a stormwater control plan. Everything will be kept on site for on-site infiltration following the filling. Some of the proposed works include improving the driveway access. It's quite close to the railway crossing now. And at the current stage, we don't have final truck traffic management plans, but that would come in the works if this moves ahead for our clients.
Okay, thanks.
So environmentally, all of the source sites would be approved for environmental considerations. And we would look after all of that for our client and make sure that's in order, as well as the import in place. And it's not like a land refuse site. It's going to be good. Compactable mineral fill is what's proposed for the bulk of it, and there's an 18-inch capping layer for agricultural purposes. And I'm sure you guys have seen our drawings or our plans, but I'd be free to any questions you guys may have on this.
Thank you. I've got one question. The proposed, I know you mentioned you don't have the truck routing yet, but are you anticipating that the trucks would be coming from 232 Street up 72 Avenue through the new rail crossing and into the property and back and not impacting
Exactly, yeah.
further east?
The proposed idea is that this would be coming off the 232nd interchange and up the hill.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I'm not understanding how big this supposed gravel pit was relative to the size of the property. Have you got a picture with you? You can show.
I do have our plans with us that have some cross sections. I can bring them to you if you want to have.
Well, we have a little
Okay.
Elmo there, or a big Elmo there.
Yeah, staff will get that on for you, I think. Where is it?
Someone there.
Are we able to zoom? There we go. Yeah.
So the parcel that we're talking about is basically this irregularly shaped lot here. And where we have had gravel extraction, it actually extends off property. Our client has talked to the neighboring parcels who don't want to participate in this filling component. So what we have is essentially the yellow line, or the orange line here outlines the top of the fill area, and everything else would slope down and then drain to this back corner for infiltration. It is an old gravel site, so we have really good infiltration and we can keep all the stormwater on site. But essentially the old gravel extraction area is basically in through here, and where we're proposing to fill is to basically bring it back in through here, and this is the rail line here that swings around. So 72nd rail crossing is right here at the north end of the property. But it basically encompasses the entire site is where the filling would take place.
Okay, and how long is it going to take to fill this?
It would be in order, if things go well and they have a large project where they're taking it from, such as one of the like the Willoughby development projects, it could be done in about 2 months' time. But more realistically, it would be one season, so maybe four months of filling, preferably in the good weather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I think you said you think it was an old gravel site, and then you just said it was an old gravel site. So can you be more definitive for me on that?
We
please?
looked at the old historical air photos to see, that go back to the 1940s, to see when this gravel potentially was taken. So it looks like, in looking back at the historical air photos, that it was a gravel extraction site.
And can I just say, what is your role in the application?
We are the geotechnical engineers on the project.
Okay.
So we prepared the fill plans for our client, who is basically a civil contractor.
Okay, so you're a geotechnical engineer?
Geotechnical engineer.
Okay, so that's good for me to clarify. Is there a benefit in terms of a fill deposit application with the ALC to have it labeled an old fill site or gravel site?
Well, in the Mining Act, you're supposed to reclaim old gravel extraction areas, not unlike what's happening in South Langley on 200th Street right now. So there is an appetite to have these basically restored back to so that they can be make better use of the land. Right now, it's basically a hole in the ground, and there's a shed, and people park their RVs there. And the intent of this is that land would be better served as a hobby farm, like I said. There's one house on the property, and then this would sort of complement that as their yard area for their hobby farm, essentially.
So just so I clarify, so that would be affirmative? There would be a benefit with the ALC to have it labeled a former gravel pit?
Yeah, there's a report by Madrone to that effect. That's not my area of expertise, but that's the intent of the project.
All right, thank you.
One other question. So the adjacent property to the east, which included part of the gravel extraction back in history.
Yeah.
And I know you've already mentioned, I see there's a swale and there's a collection. Is there once, if this is approved and everything happens, the elevation change between the completed fill site and the adjacent property, how much is that, and is there any chance that there would be incursion of water into the adjacent property?
No, we've directed all of the water basically away from that property. There was some early discussions that they would be a part of this and the fill area would be larger. Okay. But the way that things went with the neighbors, it was decided, and we've done everything we can. So that's a slope coming down on their property from basically east down to west, and then we've continued that slope on into our sort of stormwater retention facility.
Are there any impacts of the railway? And what are the rail, I know sometimes the rail setbacks and concerns that they have?
The communications we've had with the railway is that they would support the fill application. So we have their preliminary approval for this.
Okay, but they'd also have to approve it at some in a formal way. So without that formal approval, it wouldn't happen either. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just don't see any other questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so now we move on to reports to council. F1 is youth passes. And there's a report there with a recommendation that we approve a $20 summer youth pass for youth aged 13 to 18. And I understand that the age complies with our existing ages that we have for the summer of 2020. So if I could have a motion, please. Councillor Woodward moves it, seconded by Councillor Arneson. Discussion of Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I just wanted to just clarify. Maybe this is a matter, just a word. Should it not say a $20 resident-based summer youth pass?
The report did discuss that, and it was felt that other jurisdictions don't have that restriction on residence-based, and that we find that friends of residents want to go there, and it encourages youth from all over to be involved in some activities. So I think it was looking at other jurisdictions, they didn't have that restriction, so that was in the report why we didn't have it. But Mr. Backen, I think that was Mr. Backen.
That's correct, Your Worship. There is the issue of differential pricing, which we will likely address, I think, in terms of subsequent meetings. But the concept here was to meet the direction of council and the direction of the committee was to bring this back so we could have it in place prior to the start of the season, which technically could start as early as May the 1st, depending upon weather conditions. So it was to have this in place, at least for this year, so we could then look at it and make a determination subsequent to that if we wanted to put those restrictions in place, given what else council may direct through the subsequent processes.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
I wanted to ask about the age range. I know that the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee was wondering about age 11. Now, I know our current youth range is 13 to 18, but what about the 11 and 12-year-olds? What are they covered under?
So, Your Worship, those are covered under the children rates, so that would have a different impact upon it. So we tried to actually take the recommendation and match it up to what our existing youth definition is. Doing so would then cause a few complications in that we'd be actually looking at the child youth pass as opposed to the youth pass, and there would be some issues with that. So we tried to do it where it was most effective, which was matching our existing rate structure.
So is there anything to stop a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old from getting one of these $20 passes? So I guess the question I'm asking is, 12-year-olds, maybe not 11-year-olds, but 12-year-olds are certainly fairly independent and like to hang out with their friends. So what if, what would a 12-year-old have to pay in order to go with their friends to the pool? Okay, so the child is getting, is going to have to pay more to use the pool than a teenager would. Okay, I'm not quite understanding the equity there. I'm wondering if we could change the age, and I'd make that motion for youth age 12 to 18.
Or just before I take that, maybe I can ask staff, would it be more appropriate to just include the child category in this $20 youth pass?
So child,
because child is, because then it allows families to bring their.
We looked at that, and there is some financial implications because you're taking away drop-in admissions, and children is a bigger amount of users than youth are. And I think the initial goal of this was to increase youth participation and usage in our facilities, and that's why we tried to limit the youth portion to encourage their uptake.
Okay, so it's a incentive when they.
Children definitely could make the bigger financial implications.
Well, maybe they could keep track of how many 12-year-olds use it are using the facility at the same time as the 13 to 18-year-olds are using it. Also, I was wondering if we could keep track of the residency for the first year of this pass too. I know that there were some statistics that came to the Parks and Rec that showed that the participation at the new Aldergrove Centre was 70% from outside of Township. So it would be nice to know if we're seeing that with these youth passes as well.
And I think the youth pass doesn't apply to the water park portion. It applies to the rec center, to the pool, to the hot tubs and the sauna. So that would have to be differentiated. I think we're seeing a higher percentage of outside using the water park, and this youth pass doesn't apply to the water park. Is that correct? Yeah. So just.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that if we're subsidizing, we're subsidizing our own residents.
Yeah.
And and I'm wondering as well if staff could maybe think about revising the youth category from 12 to 18. It just seems unfair that a 12-year-old pays $30 and a 13-year-old pays $20, and the 13-year-old gets 2 months out of it. The 12-year-old only gets 1.
Bracken, is that something we should do?
It could be an amendment, Your Worship, if that's what Council wishes to do.
If you wish to make that amendment now, one thing, what was the concerns about having a 12-year-old interfere? But for this particular pass, we could still manage that. Is that correct?
By the ages, so as as was said, we can proceed with that and do the age check.
Okay, I've I have two other speakers. We'll hold that motion just for now, and then we'll go to Councillor Long.
Well, I had exactly the same concern, and the report mentions all kinds of ages. Originally, it was asked to be 11 to 17, and then the comparators from Delta, for example, talks about 10 to 18, and then we are at whatever it is now. So there's different ages, and I think we should have some consistency around the region. So, what is the? May I ask, Mr. through you, Your Worship, to staff, what is the age rate for the child and youth? So, what are the two ages that we're dealing with? So youth, we know, I guess, our youth rate, because that's what this report is recommending, is 13 to 18. I guess that's what we're calling youth. So what are we calling child?
Under 12.
Period. Okay. Well, then I would support a change when it's time, and I think we should probably make it 11. But wait a minute, that means that a 10-year-old is going to pay more as well.
Correct.
So it gets worse. The more we fix it, the worse it gets. Because at the end of the day, the 9-year-old or the 8-year-old is going to be paying for everybody. Poor kid. Okay, well, we'll have to change it.
Okay. Well, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I was thinking about this, and I did have a question that came up when I read the entire report, and I wondered, I know $20 seems like a really good deal, but I'm wondering if that still includes a hardship provision for those where it still may be difficult to come up with $20. Would that still be an option for younger people to utilize?
The hardship provision still exists. There's a separate process for that, so if it was to be an issue, that could be dealt with through that process.
Okay, and just generally speaking, I'm really in favor of this, although I guess as to a separate amendment to change the number to 11, I know that staff must have done a calculation of all of the costs involved, and it seemed like it was predicated on it being more or less a wash in terms of money coming in. So I don't know that I'm going to support an amendment just because I don't know what that would mean from a financial point of view. And some communities have been better off financially by having a pass because more kids come, so they get more general revenue. But I don't know what that would mean, and so I, would be a little bit unclear about that.
Councillor Kunst.
What is the age that the child can be at the recreation center without their parents, where there's no supervision? Is it 12? Is that sort of where we got that number from?
It's actually 7 years old. If you're in the pool, you have to be within arm's reach for the pool. We don't have an age that you have to be at the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, when you're ready to move a motion,
sure.
I've got a suggestion.
Councillor Richter. So I'm ready. So Councillor Richter had a motion she wanted to move. So your suggestion is what?
I would suggest we would change it to child/youth and take the ages out. So we're going to give a deal to both.
Your Worship, we could do that. I mean, that certainly could be done. Remember, though, this was intended to be, I guess, economically neutral. Through our last budget challenges, we've been trying to actually do fine-tuning as opposed to increase subsidies. So the provision here was to attract more youth to the facilities, not to actually lower the revenue from other youth. So this is a bit of a, I guess, a lost leader with the thought that we could actually return to something more economically viable in future if that's what council wished. So we're starting to get into the economic arguments at this point. It's my only point.
Okay.
So just to follow up on that, Your Worship, maybe $20 is not the number, so we should probably refer it back to staff and have them figure it out first then.
And we can, as long as we are prepared to miss this season, because that's what we're trying to bring this at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, maybe I can be some help here. The original intent of the Culture and Parks Recreation Committee here was to provide youth discount during the summer season for teenagers with a lack of some facilities and maybe some options in the community, and the perception that they would potentially engage more in our facilities with a lower cost. So I have no real issue with where it's going, but I don't see why we'd have to link the two. So I would like to approve the 13 to 18 or 12 to 18, and if some want to look at an additional pass for next season, to do that, but not to hold this up or refer it back or govern on the fly, as I've been accused of many times. Thanks.
Thank you. No, you haven't. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm willing to go with this motion right now, but I would like staff, if possible, to track the 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds so that we have and report back to us, after this season.
Okay, Mr. Backen, can you take that as direction, or would you like a motion? So we can deal with this motion and then take that as direction. Okay, any further discussion on the motion in front of us? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on F1.
Just the motion not as amended?
No, there's been no amendment. So on the motion, there's direction to staff to come back for next year. It carries with Council Long opposed. And now we move on to F2. Oh, Council Richter?
Yeah, and could we also give direction that we get a track back on the percentage of these passes that are being sold to non-residents?
Yeah. So Mr. Backen's taken that as direction. It could be a motion, but I think from Mr. Backen, you can take it as just as direction, and staff will report back to us. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. All right, so now we'll move on to F2. And prior to taking motion, I'd just like to ask Mr. Seffi to give us a bit of background on this one. Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a request that has come forward from UBCM as a result of us sharing the report with them, which is essentially a very minor procedural clarification, if you will, or correction. And if I can draw Council's attention to the two resolutions that the staff report requests Council consider and pass on pages 4 and 5. So currently, both resolutions read, therefore be it resolved that the province of BC, and then it goes on to require certain actions. As Council is aware, we are unable to compel the province of BC to do anything, so the request is that Council consider the following amendments for the two resolutions, those being, therefore be resolved that UBCM request that the province of BC, and the rest of the wording remains the same.
Okay, so with that change, Councillor Ferguson moves it. Second by Councillor Arneson. And discussion, Councillor Richter.
Okay. So the question that I have around there is around this, and I've got no problems with the motions. I think they're good motions or good resolutions. But who is going, like, these I assume will appear on the LMLGA and the UBCM agendas under the title of Township of Langley. And if that's the case, who from this table is going to be there to speak to them? Because last year, City of Langley had motions, and nobody from the city spoke to them. I ended up speaking to them. So I think at least somebody from this council should be there to speak to them.
Well, I'm planning to be there, and Councillor Ferguson will make sure to LGA and Union BC. I'm also planning to be there.
Make a few changes on that if you don't.
Yeah,
as long as somebody from council
definitely
speaks
try and speak to ours. Yeah, we'll have some staff. Okay, for discussion, seeing none, I want to call the question on F2. Carries unanimously. And we move on to F3, Rain Garden Update. And the report is attached, and a good report. Thank you, staff. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Davis. Discussion, Councillor Richter.
Now, Councillor Ferguson just moved receipt.
No, endorse, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I move the recommendation.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
So I have some questions around this with regards to, it appears to me from reading the report that it was never made clear that these rain gardens are basically an extension of their maintenance responsibilities. Nobody told them that. They didn't understand that. And so now we're going to include provisions going forward, like covenants, that these properties understand that they do have to maintain these gardens. Now, what happens to the properties that have already been sold that don't have the covenants?
So, as I understand it, they did have covenants. Mr. Seffi, did they have covenants? I thought they did.
Your Worship, the covenant, registration has not been a consistent requirement. So while some properties, I guess the more recent ones do have them, and the staff recommendation is to proceed and make that a consistent requirement going forward. Some of the older ones do not have them as registered on the title. However, our bylaws are clear in terms of the responsibilities of homeowners in terms of maintenance of boulevards and sidewalks. But we plan to, with Council's direction and endorsement, to make that a specific requirement going forward with development applications coming forward.
Okay, but the concern, as I heard it expressed when the residents came to speak to us, was that it's a lot of work to maintain these gardens from their perspective. So do we have the option of allowing them to opt out, but they would pay an additional levy on their annual property taxes to the township to take over their maintenance of this? Is that something we could consider?
Your Worship, it could certainly, upon council direction, be evaluated, but there is, I guess, some consideration that has to be given to the practicality of making sure that it's done on a basis that makes sense, and it's not, I guess, one in and one out within the same block. So it has to be some kind of a system put into place to make sure that there is some practicality to making sure that it happens in a way that it can be maintained either by the township or the residents. But in theory, it is possible, yes.
Yeah, well, what I'm getting at is we would want to do cost recovery for our costs in maintaining. There's not that many different little communities that have this right now, or subdivisions, so it probably shouldn't be that hard to reach out to them and say, okay, if you don't want to take care of it, then we'll charge you an extra levy. And the levy will be, I don't know, $50 a month per house, whatever it works out to. So I'm willing to support this, but I'd like to put an amendment in after everyone's had a chance that we ask staff to figure out this opt-out one for the houses that are grandfathered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, okay. So, I think we can ask a few things. I don't want to take it into our, as part of the report, is take it into a $300,000 addition to our budget. We don't want to do that. But I do, and Councillor Richter might be right, but most people in the stratas nowadays, they don't want to pay any more for fees, so paying a little more money, whether it's $10 or $50 a month, they don't want to do that. But it's certainly worth trying. Another thing I had, another suggestion, is that within their own strata, I'm not talking within the Township of Langley, but within their own strata, maybe perhaps there's some folk that may want to adopt the rain garden, like we have adopt a street, we have adopt a park, adopt other things, but it would be entirely their project. If someone in their townhouse or their whatever it is, their dwelling unit might want to do that. And we can help them, it's just additional tools, we can help them maybe provide examples with bins and bags or picker-uppers and things like that, and teach them a little bit of how our system works so they can implement them as well. But certainly that's another idea. If I may, through the chair, is that something that staff considered, if I may?
Certainly, Your Worship, that's an excellent idea, and it could be added to the brochure, because one of the tasks that we have assigned ourselves is to update the brochure, because it doesn't currently reflect the fact that there's been changes to the standards. So when we do that, we will take a look at the possibility of adding some language to encourage stratas to essentially take up the responsibility over a defined period of time, whether it's 6 months or 1 year, as adopt a program.
I think that's something we consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I really enjoyed the staff report because I thought it was a very good job of synthesizing what was said to us from people that were both participating in a petition and also making a delegation to council. My thought about this, however, is that reading the entirety of the report, I'm somewhat concerned that this is a somewhat novel but gaining ground approach to infrastructure and rainwater management. And so I think if we are not very vigilant to make sure that we are putting it out there and sort of protecting it, in the sense, when I saw pictures of people covering it up with the different things and wanting to park on it and stuff, this is actually infrastructure. You know, we wouldn't allow anybody to do that if it was a pipe, and so this effectively is the same thing. I've given it quite a bit of thought. I like the idea, actually, of a adopt your rain garden, if that could be an approach. Likely, if you go to Milner Heights and you see the extensiveness on different streets of this, may be the case that somebody would have to adopt a block or two just for consistency. But I certainly don't support the township taking them over either. And I know, further to Councillor Ferguson's point about nobody wants any extra costs, but I'm reasonably certain that these stratas have maintenance and garden workers that come and do these things. And with the right education, I think that it could be managed rather reasonably. And just one final thought, if we are putting together further information and it's required as a restrictive covenant, I just want to make sure that somehow we are proactive as to where that is considered in somebody's purchase agreement, that it's not buried in some language somewhere where people say, well, I didn't know it was there. I just would like to know that it's sort of upfront and highlighted that this is their responsibility to take this on, because in fact, this is best management. This is a practice that we should be implementing in the Township of Langley. So we have to somehow come to terms with these conflicting ideas about, you know, whether or not people want to maintain them or not. But in fact, they were designed to be maintained and they have to be there.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, on page 4, there's a whole section on the environmental implications of these rain gardens. It also mentions in the recommendation, which I'm very much in favor of, that we just need to work on making the public more aware of how beneficial they are. And I believe if we really think about what the delegation was saying, they said they didn't want to discuss who's going to take care of. They just wanted them taken out because they thought, you know, they don't want them there, and I don't think they realized how important they are. Now, I've lived in Estrada for a number of years, and I think that, as it says here on page 2, any boulevard in the urban area of the township is the responsibility of the adjacent landowners. So stratas need to instruct their landscaping folks, because they all have landscaping contracts, because there's plenty of other landscaping in Estrada, that they have to also take care of this piece in the front. So I think that if we're going to monkey around and change some of the wording, that might, in my mind, be dangerous, because I don't think that there is a concern about, you know, I mean, they need to know that they have to maintain it, and altering isn't going to help. And if you start to give the impression that, oh, well, you don't have to do it because we'll figure out some other mechanism to pay somebody else to do it, I think that's wrong, because that could affect the entire township, because it's not just rain gardens, but the boulevard in front of your home and your property has to be maintained as well, according to our bylaws. So we want to instill pride and also do the correct environmental thing. So I think the report, as we have it, Your Worship, does that, and I think that's what we should proceed with.
Thank you. Okay, that exhausts the speakers list. So unless I hear anything else, I'll call the question on the, Councillor Richter. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I was going to add an amendment to this, but I can put it on afterwards, just that we ask staff to figure out a way to deal with the grandfathered properties if they want to opt out.
Okay, so for staff to explore that option.
But a cost-neutral option.
Okay. Mr. Backen, do you want that as an amendment or a separate motion, or is just direction? So this would be Mr. Sevi?
Your Worship, I think a motion would be ideal, as I have a feeling it will take some time to explore the option and how it might actually, the mechanics of it, how it might work out. So
we'll deal with this, and then we'll take it as a separate motion.
Okay, and now this will include adding Adopt a Rain Garden if we vote on this.
Yeah. I think that'll add. That's a simple one to add to the.
That's correct, Your Worship. Yes.
To the brochure. Okay, I'm going to call the question on F3. It carries unanimously, and so Councillor Richter, your mic is still on. If you wish to make a follow-up motion,
I would move that Council ask staff to explore and report back on options and costs, or to explore and report back on cost-neutral options for the township to take over maintenance of the rain gardens in grandfathered areas.
Is there a seconder? I don't see us. Okay, Councillor Davis seconds it. Councillor Kunst.
Do we know how many of those properties would be grandfathered? Like how many properties have rain gardens that they would not be aware of, that they were in charge of maintaining them?
The answer is no, Your Worship. I was going to take a guess and say likely hundreds, but it would just be a rough guesstimate off the top of my head. The answer is no. We don't know exactly at this point. I don't know at this point, but certainly we can find the information out. But we don't have it right now.
Do we know how many people have petitioned the township to not want to maintain those rain gardens, or was it just the one delegation? I don't remember.
The delegation had a petition. 55 signatures were on the petition that was submitted in September of 2019.
So would that be for one neighborhood or one development? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Worship, just as a caution, the comments are actually as to a covenant on the title, not that there wasn't a level of notification either through the sales contract, the prospectus, or the disclosure statement. As we have regulatory bylaws, many of our bylaws aren't on title, but because of the concerns of the resident, we determined that some had covenants and some did not. It was really a matter of practice of the development process, where there was actually zoning for this provided. So it's just some background.
Thank you. Thank you. And I see this as, similar to when it snows, you have to clear your sidewalk, you have to take care of the front of your property. That is pretty common right across the Lower Mainland, I think, all municipalities. So, I'm confident in our bylaw process to make people aware, and I think once they're aware, they'll comply. I see this as could be burdensome to the municipality to start assessing the one property owner who likes to be a gardener and the other one who doesn't. But I think it's a duty of all property owners. And a lot of these properties aren't just stratas; they're single-family units, and they front these types of infrastructure. And I think I'd rely on the bylaw rather than go to another process. So I won't be supporting it. Councillor Long.
Yeah, I agree, Your Worship, and I don't think that the word grandfathering is appropriate here because, as has been mentioned, there's no covenant on all the boulevards because back in the day we didn't do that. We started to add them because there was some concern. So I think this is going to be a huge project and might give the wrong message to the public. I think the message is clear. Keep your boulevard in good condition in front of your home.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, okay. Well, the issue as I see it is a matter of the degree of effort to maintain. I mean, I have a boulevard in front of my house, and all I have to do is push a lawnmower down it and cut the grass. These people have to go in and weed and pick up garbage and trim bushes. Now, I think these rain gardens are wonderful. I think they're a very beautiful addition to neighborhoods. But if we did not include restrictive covenants on those properties, I don't see how we can, but we're going to in the future, which I agree with. We should be requiring the restrictive covenants in the but is it not a matter of staff just taking a look at the number of properties that have restrictive covenants, and in that case then there is no bailout feature? If they don't have a restrictive covenant, then they get the option, maintain it, or pay us an additional levy every year, and we'll maintain it for you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Woodward. Oh, Whitmarsh, sorry. I wasn't reading it correctly.
Yep.
Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think the motion that we just passed is a good first step for education and to allow people to know what they are responsible for in front of their properties. And I'm not sure we need to go any further at this point. I think people have all sorts of choices of how they take care of the property in front of them, whether they do that themselves, whether they hire somebody else, whether they hire the kid down the street. There's all sorts of options. So I think there is a responsibility of everyone to keep the front of their properties in good shape, and so I wouldn't support this motion.
Okay, thank you. See no further discussion. I'll call the question on I'll call it F3. The motion fails with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kunst, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Davis opposed. We move on to F4, and this is open house and public consultation results of the draft 2020-2024 financial plan. This is for receipt and also for to direct staff to bring forward for consideration the draft plan to the regular meeting on March 23rd. Could I have a motion on those? Councillor Whitmarsh, seconder. I have a second. Councillor Davis. Discussion. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I would like to ask for clarification in bringing forward the draft financial plan. Will it include adding the light at 240th and 56th, plus an upgrade to the light at 272nd and 28th?
Ms. Sinclair.
For the projects that were included in the public consultation, we can accommodate them all if council so wishes.
Okay. Well, I would like to add that amendment that staff bring forward for to the regular afternoon meeting on March 23rd, which includes adding the light at 240th and 56th, as well as an upgrade to the light at 272nd and 28th.
Is there a seconder?
Second
Councillor Arneson seconds. So let's clear the queue. Any discussion on that? Councillor Long?
Yeah, I was just, the comments that we just heard, there were other items, though, in the open house that I thought I heard staff saying that could all be funded. So I know we're highlighting these two, but were there other things that we should be aware of? And if we just passed the motion to bring it forward, would all of those things come forward, which is including the offices and everything else, I think, right?
Mr. Backen?
Karen, I think they're actually asking which ones were included in the base budget previously and which ones were sent out for consultation. Which other items were there that were consulted on which did not actually include in the base budget? Your Worship, perhaps while we're reviewing that, it'd be appropriate to pass this amendment and then there can be subsequent amendments. That doesn't preclude further amendments, but at least we get these ones off the table.
Okay, sure. So we'll just...
Worship, there's just one other point perhaps Council can provide direction on as far as the crosswalk or improvements at 272nd and 228 were concerned. There were three options that were presented to as part of the open house. So I wonder if there's a specific direction as to which option to include.
Councillor Richter.
Councillor Long, which one did you?
Well, thanks for asking, because there was only one included in the motion that was passed by council, and that was to make it a full operated pedestrian light, which I think is option 2.
Option 2, okay. So we'll include that as
But with that, there
part of the amendment. Then is that, yeah. So see any dispute. So on the amendment, on this particular amendment, Councillor Ferguson.
Well, with that, there was a lot of discussion at 28th and 272nd. I mean, the option was to explore avenues to make it as safe by using, what do they call those, directional pylons or something, and other things that would not mean it as expensive, but would provide just as safe or a better situation as right now. I know that I don't have it right in front of me, but that was something that staff was going to explore rather than a full-blown intersection. Anyway, those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Could I have the amendment read back, please?
The amendment reads that the draft 2020 to 2024 financial plan include a new light at 240th Street and 56th Avenue and include pedestrian lights at 272 and 28th Avenue.
Option 2.
Option 2, yeah.
Okay, so the amendment would contemplate some minor adjustments to the financial plan, or was that, because I understood that light was actually included within the public open house consultations with the tax increases shown. So what would the amendment be doing if I thought that intersection was already outlined within prior surplus and the DCC program?
Ms. Sinclair, can you...
Through your worship to Councillor Woodward, the amount that was included, and we're just talking about the capital items now, which is what I thought the question was.
So Karen, the question is actually, is it already included in the budget? That's what the question is, or is this motion necessary? We've taken from your comments that these items were part of the public consultation, but were not included, but could be included very easily.
This is the item, 28th Avenue and 272nd Street was the item that was not included initially, but it did go to public open house, and we did identify funds that could fund it.
The 240th and 56 included or not?
It was included.
So then the motion is really, the amendment is only on the second part, 272.
No, I'll just wait for staff to explain. Yeah.
So these were, the differentiation would be items that were included in the budget presentation but not funded, which is the rest of the list, and this item was not actually included initially. So these are the items that were highlighted for additional public consultation, and the one-time, we identified a number of funding sources that could fund this list.
Okay, so we're only dealing with two amendments, and the question is 240th and 56th included now without any further motion being needed, and the second one applies to 272 and 28. I think from what you said is 240 and 56 is. If, however, the motion is only redundant, then it can remain, and the second question is 272 and 28 that we know is not included.
The 40th and 56th was not, it was included in the budget but not funded. It was unfunded.
So this motion is required to give direction to fund it. Okay, Councillor Woodard?
No, I have more follow-up questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
so if I can ask another question. You want to clarify what's going on there?
No, you still have the floor. I'm just wondering if you're satisfied.
Yeah, I'd like to carry on if I could. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify then, so in regards to voting in favor of this amendment, that would include the 12,000 missile assistant factor into the draft financial plan, and the remainder comes from the DCC program. I just want to clarify that it's not a substantial change to the proposed tax increase for that first component. Is that correct?
Correct. It's $12,000 as the general revenue component.
Yeah. All right. So that clarifies, because there was some different numbers shown at the open house. So I'm glad that that's been clarified. And then can you itemize what the additional tax increase would be for the second component before we vote on it? Is that possible, or would that have to wait until the subsequent draft financial plan is amended?
Second component of
the second option of 272 and 28.
Yeah, the option
that was the 250,000.
So can you itemize from us what the implications of that addition would be, please? Is that possible, or do we have to wait for that for the next subsequent meeting?
Or Karen, I think the question is that being funded from surplus, or is that being funded from an increase in the tax rate?
That's correct. That's what the question is.
We have a combination. They're not identified to this specific funding source. So we have a combination of increases in the contribution to capital, as well as some one-time prior year surplus funding.
Okay, so the concern I have is, of course, in the draft financial plan that was submitted to us, it indicates $250,000 from general revenue, not any combination of other sources. So I wouldn't be quite clear on exactly what implications I'm voting for or against.
So so Mr. Clare, if you can clarify, as I understand it, this you've identified funding which will not impact the tax increase that was discussed. Is that correct? That this funding has been identified?
The funding has been identified.
Doesn't impact the
correct.
Tax increase.
It's part of the percentage increases that we went forward with, the 2.98 and the 5.95.
So when it indicates $250,000 in general revenue, that is already included in the numbers that were presented?
Yes.
But was there not? So this is why maybe division or taking these items separately would have been prudent. The second one, I'm not clear. What exactly are we? Weren't we agreeing to a infrastructure improvement that was more than $250,000? Isn't that actually what the amendment was for?
Mr. Seppi, the question is the option 2. What does that entail, and what does that cost?
I believe the cost was $250,000, as Ms. Sinclair pointed out. The first option, or one of the options, I forget the order in which they were presented, but the cheapest, if you will, option was to undertake some improvements in terms of, I guess, lane delineation and narrowing of the lane at the intersection. That would be the cheapest, and I believe it was around $35,000. And the most expensive one would have been to install a full signalization at, I believe it was $350,000.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, would we contemplate division on this? Because I'd like to vote and debate on them separately.
Okay, so we will. You move to divide. Is there a seconder to divide? Seconder? I'll second. Councillor Arneson seconds. Just show of hands on division. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Richter opposed. We will divide. So we'll work on the first one first, which is the 240th and 56th. So I still have Speaker Councillor Richter.
No, it was clarified in the course of the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll vote on the amendment to include 240th and 56th traffic light. I'm going to call a question on that. That carries unanimously. And now we will vote on The second one, which is the full signalization, traffic control. Okay, Councillor Woodward. Yeah.
So the reason I moved division on that is because I fully support the addition of the first item. But before we agree to or vote on the $250,000 for option 2, in the capital sheet it shows full signalization or full signal installation for $300,000, a pedestrian signal installation for $250,000. So what I'm reading is for an extra $50,000, we potentially have a more significant addition or improvement to the intersection. And I don't know if I have really a full understanding of the difference between a full signal installation for $300,000, at least as what was submitted on page 25, versus a pedestrian signal installation for $250,000. What the difference would be between the two in terms of potentially considering the $50,000 more option, which is not a significant addition in the context of the entire budget.
Your Worship, the difference should be about $100,000. I'm not sure which page Councillor Woodward is referring to, but if there is one that reflects $300,000, it's a typo, I would suggest, or an error. It should say $350,000. That's the best estimate that we have for the full signalization.
That is the staff report F4, page 25, if people want to pull that up. Mr. Sethi, maybe you can refer to that, because if that's a typo, I'd like to get that confirmed. Right there. Okay.
In the body right
here. The estimate that is here, I believe, was updated when the report was brought forward to council. So that report would have updated this. So I can confirm that the numbers that we currently have is actually $350,000 and not $300,000. I apologize for the confusion.
Okay, so I think I'll support the $250,000 with maybe some further consideration of the additional $100,000 at the next council meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I just want to also quick question to staff. That was on the actual option B or option 2. It was, I believe, up to 250,000. We are hoping that might indeed not have to be 250. Is that correct, or you think you're pretty accurate with 250?
Mr. Sethi.
Your Worship, no, we are not fairly accurate. It's the best estimate that we have without the benefit of a design or a survey. So it's based on previous similar projects, but it's not based on actual design. So it is not definitive.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, I sure would like to pretend that it was 300,000 because the intersection needs to be fixed properly. So, I mean, here we are trying to do it on the fly, which we've already said is not a good idea. And I would certainly agree that that we should do the very best we can. The traffic is increasing on 272nd, and traffic's increasing everywhere. So having a full intersection there is probably the better way to go. There's also, I can recall many occasions where people have been running the stop sign on 28th Avenue. The visibility has been an issue there too. So I'm not sure where we're at now with all the different numbers, but if we can just go by what's in the report, I would support the 300,000 if we could do that, and perhaps if the staff had to come with some more. Well, it's all of a sudden 350, but I mean there is already a bunch of wiring there already. There is electrical in the ground. I know that's a proponent. There's also some other poles and so forth in the ground. So I think staff are doing their best not to come under budget, but those are considerations. If you're putting an intersection in from nowhere, you have to put all the underground wiring in and so forth. And I know that some of that does exist because we have the existing site. So wherever council wants to go with it, let's just make sure we do the right thing. Let's just do it, get it as safe as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I was going to say I like Councillor Woodward's suggestion about go with the 250 option now, and if we can find another $100,000 between now and when the budget comes back, we could maybe pull that and update it to the 350. I just, in looking at what's in this report, the George Preston landscape upgrade, 62% were against funding this project. Now, granted, it wasn't a large sample, but if we discontinued that, there's an extra $50,000 there we could pull out and put into upgrading 272nd. So, just a suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
I don't have another debate item. I just want to ask another question. If I could clarify again, on that page it says 250,000 general revenue. So I just want to confirm again whether or not we're increasing the tax increase to add this item at 250,000 to the budget draft financial plan.
No, it is part of the original percentages that were taken to the public open house. And can I add one thing? I mentioned that we were able to fund the capital projects that went to the public open house. The residual that we have is $83,018, so $83,000. So we are very close to that 100,000 that you're talking about. I just wanted to give you that information.
Okay, so I'll note that maybe for others to pursue. So I just want to confirm again that we're not making any substantial changes to the tax increases or the rates that were shown to the public at the open house at this point.
No changes at this point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Richter.
Okay, so did I just understand correctly that there's $83,000 sitting left over in this year's budget that we could put towards the highest level of safety? Plus, we could get rid of the George Preston landscape upgrade or take some money out of that.
Mr. Seffi, your mic's on.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So, and these are things we can do now. We can do them now, or we can do them when this comes back. Mr.
Worship,
Mr. Backen.
that would mean amending the budget bylaw on the fly.
Okay.
So if council wishes to actually add the more expensive option in, my suggestion would be to make that an amendment to the amendment now, rather than being 250,
Okay,
make
I
it
will
350.
make that amendment to the amendment.
With the proviso there'd be no increase in the tax
So
rates.
the amendment to the amendment is to, you can just, to go to the 350.
Go to 350,000 for, I believe it's option 3.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Whitmarsh. Open that. Is there discussion on the amendment to the amendment? I don't see any. I'll call the question. Carries unanimously. So now we're on the amendment as amended, which is kind of redundant. I will call the question on that. Or the motion as amended, I guess. There we go. Because now we've completed all the motions, right, Ms. Bauer? Okay, we're good. All right, thank you. Councillor Woodward, do you have something to add on that?
I have one other question inquiry on something else. Page 26 now, through to you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, just clarifying that traffic calming improvements that were included for 150,000. I believe the two plans that were combined together into the final vote, contemplating the traffic calming improvements coming from 2 reserves, but here it indicates general revenue. Could I get that clarified?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Woodward. This project sheet is actually coming forward from the original budget presentation. So the 150 was unfunded at the time, and you subsequently identified those 3 reserves. So the reserve funding is the source of funding for this project.
Yeah, I think it may have ended up with 2, but I'll leave that with you at this point.
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm that that's not coming from general revenue. It was coming as originally adopted by council.
It's coming from the reserves identified.
Yeah, okay, that's great to clarify. Also, Mr. Mayor, I was planning on leaving some subsequent potential proposed amendments once I actually have the draft financial plan in front of me, but maybe there seems to be a desire to get some of those done now. I don't think they were very significant, but they were in contemplation of still waiting on some information regarding some of the proposed DCC projects and some road widening that seemed to contemplate some land purchases which would not have been funded through the DCC program. Maybe that can be clarified. Would we have those in time for the draft financial plan?
I think your question is, just to confirm, is can we add some DCC expenditures?
Remove
some DCC expenditures from the I'll have to question this, and from the existing 2012 bylaw or the revised bylaws submitted?
Not revising the DCC program, but removing some transportation projects from the funding envelope based upon, it seemed to be that some of those DCC projects, within the DCC program, contemplated land purchases which were not within the DCC program. But I'm still waiting to have that confirmed.
Giuseppe, are you aware of the
I am not aware specifically, no.
Okay, so I'll resend that request, and I just wanted curious, would those be relatively minor adjustments only involving the municipal assist factor? So I just want to give council a head up on that. I wasn't preparing to try to make those amendments, not until having the full draft financial plan in front of me. So I think there will be more amendments at the next council meeting. Thank you.
And there would still be room for amendments. So right now we have this motion as amended. That's so I need. Yeah. So this motion. Is there any further amendments? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the motion as amended. Carries unanimously. All right, that takes care of F4. Move on to F5, soil deposit application for property 23788 72 Avenue. There's a motion here to not refer, or we could refer. So a motion has been moved to not refer the soil deposit. Is there a seconder? Councillor Woodward seconds. Discussion. Councillor Long?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it was a former gravel pit we're finding out now, which is going to bring a whole other perhaps stream of application in. I think that there's a fault in the way that we gauge the neighborhood. I mean, you've got 80% of the people didn't respond at all. And when we looked at our borrowing bylaws and other things, when we don't get a negative response, you kind of assume that people are in favor of it. So I guess that's the motion that's on the table, but I think that the fill should be allowed to go ahead. I don't see any issue with it, especially so close to the freeway. Anyhow.
So just to clarify with the clerk, so if this motion is defeated, then a subsequent motion could come on the table to refer. Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Well, yeah, I actually tend to agree with Councillor Long and also the delegation that they presented some ideas to us that, you know, we have this balloting process where people make decisions. If they don't answer it, it's a no. I know that's something that's we discuss over and over again, but not too many folks live around that area. Plus, it's close to the freeway, and I guess we're finding out it is they're going to rehabilitate a gravel pit for the benefit, of agriculture, and they have a drainage plan and a number of other things. Of course, the Land Commission could always turn it down, but it certainly doesn't hurt to. I think I'm not going to support not referring it. I think it should be referred.
Thank you, Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. It could be the case, as we've seen in a couple of other instances, that potentially our strategy doesn't necessarily meet. It's not tailored to every single situation to maybe get an optimum result. However, I did notice from the staff report that even the updated information is that there was a lack of support in this process. So I want to support our process, and what I would underline is that the proponent always has an opportunity to advance an updated application further to it being a worked out gravel pit that they want to rehabilitate. And so if that's a different flavor that they'd like to bring forward, but I'm reluctant to allow this to go forward without having that requisite information. So I sort of put the ball back, I guess, in their court, because I'm not going to support this at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, just if I may through to staff, Mr. Brecken, does this process involve any sort of detailed feedback from the results of the petition on some of the rationale for voting in opposition to these applications?
No, it doesn't. It's just
it does not. And see, I think that's what, I kind of knew the answer already. I think that I would like to see the process involve some of that, because I'm struggling with not understanding what the rationale is from some of the property owners that are adjacent to not supporting it, and then me overruling that or voting against the policy that we put in place from the previous council, essentially ignoring those votes in conjunction with the policy as it's been adopted. And I think we're now seeing this, if I'm wrong, Ms. May, this is the third or fourth one that's on the path to being approved in direct opposition to the prescribed policy, with no attempts by any of the people doing that to actually amend the policy. So I'll remind or ask again for those that are doing that to please come forward and amend the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was, Mr. Backen maybe can help. I think there was an amendment to the policy, and I know I missed the meeting when it actually, I wasn't able to attend when it actually came through, but we have had some attempts to change the policy over time, and certainly I would be glad to entertain further amendments to the policy, but I know we do recall there was an attempt not too long ago to amend it, and there were some amendments made, but certainly we can go further. Councillor Richter.
Yes, and that was our original policy. I think they required 80%, and we brought it down to 67%. Yeah. Well, it's been 67%. I think one of the questions that came out in my mind is if this is truly a gravel pit that needs to be rehabilitated, and that there's a requirement under federal law to do this, why isn't the gravel pit next door being rehabilitated at the same time? And the owner of the property next door doesn't appear to have...
closed information.
Oh, okay. So I'm just curious about this whole thing, so I think we should stick with our policy.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
I'd be happy to make a suggestion to the policy, but that'll be another discussion. But I think that the 80% that didn't respond probably are okay with it, and big letters should be on the notice that says if you don't respond, then we'll take it as that you don't mind. So I'm not sure when we can do that, but I think we should revise it because this is the third time around and it doesn't seem to be working.
All right, thank you. At this point, I'll call the question on F5. There is no amendment. It is as the question is that council not refer the soil deposit application for this address. So it's to not refer. That is the question. So if you vote in favor,
I inadvertently pressed the wrong button.
you can push it again. Yeah.
There, thank you.
Yeah, lots of time for that. So the motion is to not refer.
The motion is not refer. I
That's
guess where I mistakenly, as you said, if this is voted down, then
If it's voted down, if this motion fails, then a subsequent motion could be put on the floor to refer. This doesn't automatically mean, if this motion fails, it doesn't automatically mean that it's referred. We would have to have another motion. So
if you vote for this,
it is, then we're not going to refer it if you vote in favor of this. It's a kind of a negative, I don't like negative motions, but that's the way it is. This particular one is to not refer the motion, okay? Okay, we're all complete on the vote. Everybody sure? Motion carries with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long opposed. And so we move on to F6. This is liquor license amendment application number 49, Backyard Vineyards Corporation. And so just to be... so this would be a motion to endorse or not to endorse? Okay. Okay, so yeah, Councillor Long moves it to endorse. Councillor Kuntz seconds. Councillor Richter, discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to propose an amendment, and I can hold off if you want me to hold off. But
You're the only one, so on speaker's list.
I would like to add a condition that no amplified instruments be used outdoors.
Amplified. Okay, is there a seconder to that? Councillor Arneson seconds it, so I'll open the amendment.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak to that because it is the noise issue that is quite concerning to the residents, as we heard when this came to public hearing. I am very concerned that we're not trying, I don't think, to put pubs into rural areas. And if they want to have a little gazebo out there and they want to have somebody singing and playing a guitar, fine, just don't amplify it and disturb the neighbors. So I think that this is a fair compromise, and I hope that council will agree with me on that.
Thank you.
And I think that they could try it for a year without the amplification, and we'll see what the neighbors feel about it. And if the neighbors are happy, we can leave it go. And if they want to come back and try again in a year to get amplified instruments, fine. But use your amplified instruments indoors, not outdoors.
Mr. Bracken.
In your worship, this is a request to the liquor board effectively, so this will be a condition we're asking of them. It'll be their decision ultimately in terms of whether they issue or whether they accept the request.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Well, yeah, so sometimes a trumpet can be louder than a electric acoustic guitar, those of us that aren't very good at playing instruments. I mean, I can see, and there's different amplification and standards from a rock band to somebody playing chamber music. I don't know. My question is to staff on, there's concerns about noise in the area. Is there any standards or other methods of measuring noise in the area or noise complaints that we could have a say about, if I may, through a chair?
Our noise bylaw does apply that sets out various decibel levels. And I'm going by recollection. I think while there certainly was noise, I'm not sure it violated the noise bylaw at that point. That was the issue. So I think that's why the request that there be no amplified music would be in order, because it doesn't relate it to the decibel level. Instead, it simply says that it's prohibitive of anything but acoustical instruments.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, I'm sorry, I can't support it because if you take an acoustic piano out there and take the lid off of it, you can make a lot of nice music, never mind noise. So and a trumpet, my goodness. And there used to be a bell there. Used to ring the bell. I don't think everyone got a free wine, but there was a bell that the public would ringing on occasion, which was an acoustic instrument. So it says right here that the compliance with municipal bylaws is important. So as much as there's an intent perhaps to try and appease the neighbors, from what I recall, there was a whole long list of concerns that the neighbors had. Noise being one, people turning around, people coming and going, people feeding the horses. So I think that we hope that folks will operate their businesses in the proper fashion. They obey the bylaws, and if there's some complaints, they need to be dealt with. But I think if we put this in, I don't know, that would, in my mind, muddy things up.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Davis on the amendment?
I think that the nature of the amendment is, and I know I've heard about the trumpets and pianos, but if you turn the speaker around and crank it up, and I think that in this area, like I'm going to support the amendment because I think it will send messages that carry on. You've got your hours changed, but let's be mindful. If there's a speaker, put it inside, and I think that it's the nature of the amendment. It'll hopefully send the messages. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on the amendment, I see no further discussion. I'll call the question. And it fails with Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Kuntz, Mayor Froese, Councillor Long, Councillor Woodward opposed. So we're back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Okay. I'm sorry, Councillor Richter. Okay, I think it's just because you're still on the main motion. Okay, carry on. You're on.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that on page 2, this particular company had an extension in 2018, and they're back 2 years later for a further extension. I am quite concerned about the precedent this is setting, that this is perhaps heading into the direction of a pub-type setup rather than a business selling wines made on the property.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I sort of went through all what the other wineries are doing and sort of looked at their, when they're open, and this seems to be fairly reasonable in my opinion. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. In consideration of this, I really think that each of these applications has to be considered within the context of what the neighborhood is. And we certainly heard from the individuals that were currently being impacted that they weren't very happy. I don't live in the area, so I'm not really sure what the nature of their concern is vis-a-vis, are they being too sensitive to these noise issues? But I do certainly think it's part of our job to establish policies and make recommendations. And if we're hearing from the public that they are not very happy, I think their peaceful enjoyment of their property should be at least on par with somebody's business model of whether or not they think they can compete with others. Because if that's the case, then I don't know where that ends, because there's always somebody who is willing to expand the envelope. I certainly didn't get the impression that the person who was speaking on behalf of the proponent was overly concerned about these ongoing issues, and I think I would have appreciated more a sense of, yes, we've been collaborating and working with the neighbors. I didn't get that sense, so I'm not going to be supporting extending their hours.
Thank you. With that, I'll call the question on F6. And it carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson opposed. And move on to F7. So what I'll do, if there's unanimous, if you're going to be declaring conflict, if there's unanimous consent, just to alter the agenda to put F7 after other business. Is that? Yeah, sure. As long as I'm here for other business. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so I don't see any concerns with that. So we're going to put F7 at the end of the agenda. Move on to correspondence, G1 and G2. If I could have a motion to receive those. Councillor Long, second by Councillor Davis. I'm going to call the question on G1. Carries unanimously. So, Ms. Bauer, you got that as a motion for both? Yeah, okay, thank you. So now we move to minutes of committees, Seniors Advisory Committee and Council Process Committee. Could we have a motion to adopt the minutes? Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Ferguson. Discussion on H1, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I'm actually disappointed that they don't want to change their name. And so the question that I have is, if they don't want to change their name, why do we assign the social planner to work with them? Like, it
Well,
doesn't make a...
Yeah. I don't know. I think Mr. Back, I don't know, the social planner, that's his role is to work with that committee. And we did ask the committee if they wish to change the name, and they didn't. So, any comments from staff on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess the answer is that we don't necessarily have the best fit for every council advisory committee support staff position. So this was considered to be the best fit.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll call the question. Oh, Councillor Arneson.
Well, I guess in defense of what was discussed, I'm a non-voting member, but I did participate in the discussion. And I think it's quite clear from the dialogue that there was some concern that if the nature of what the committee was, so if you change the name, you have to do something to change the terms of reference, number one. And number two, that in adding another component that would expand the scope of what that group was looking at, that it would in fact potentially dilute the seniors' focus of that committee. So that's, I think, the basis of that decision from my perspective.
Thank you. And just to add, it doesn't stop council when the committees are, reapplied or reformed at the end of each term. Council could still do that if they wanted to change the name and change the terms of reference. But I think this is a good process where the committee had a say, and I certainly respect that. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, well, social planner's been there. It's a social planner and planner, and it certainly fits the mold of the actual staff member. The second thing is we had robust discussion regarding it, and it was a committee. The members that we put on there, they thought it was, at this point in time, not a need to change the committee name. So we did have much discussion, and it was very positive.
Okay, thank you. So that'll call the question on H1. Carries unanimously. And H2, motion to endorse the 2020 Seniors Advisory Committee Work Plan. Could I have a motion? Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Long. Discussion, Councillor Long, on the work plan?
Yeah, great. It's a nice work plan. I'm just wondering if I could mention to the council reps that there's a couple of mentions in the work plan about pedestrian safety and so forth. And there is this Vision Zero, sort of a worldwide initiative to try and make streets safer. So maybe the committee could look into how we could play a part in Vision Zero road safety.
We talked about that.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you.
So that'll call the question on H2. Carries unanimously. And is there any other business?
Well, I'm sorry.
Is there any other business? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I just wanted to bring to Council's attention that the Surrey School Board has suspended district space rentals after experiencing a confirmed case of COVID-19. So I think Council probably needs to have a discussion around this, and it probably might fall into the realm of policy, but I think it's probably pressing policy. And that is, should we follow suit with the Surrey School District and stop renting out public space right now until the COVID-19 issues that are going on right now subside a bit? Or should we be completely disinfecting TOL rented facilities after use?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Backen, and it's a good point. I know we certainly have our emergency preparedness people aware of this, and also the province, and we'd be taking direction from the province. What is the policy and what is happening with staff during this time with our public facilities? Is there any extra disinfecting taking place, and is there a consideration at some point that perhaps if we're to hear more from the public health that we'd be cancelling?
Both are correct, Your Worship. At the present time, we've used our contractors to enhance the cleaning activities that are underway. I wouldn't say they're full in terms of trying to do a full sweep every time, but I mean, they're doing all the things that are usually touched and then enhance that cleaning with stronger, I guess, materials. As well, we're working with the emergency coordinator and as well with other levels of government on this topic to try to make sure that we are in the full, knowledge base in terms of how to proceed. So that's underway. In terms of what other jurisdictions are doing, they seem to be situational to some of the experiences they're having exposure. So that's also a factor. And if we were of the, I guess, opinion that it was necessary to actually close some of the facilities or close some of the rooms, I guess would be the better way of putting it, we would just do so and advise council as we would do that in consultation with other levels of government. So that's our protocol that's in place at the moment. If council wishes to advise further, we could do that as well.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up question, would staff, I understand what you just said, that if there are closures, you'd advise council. Would it be helpful for staff to have a motion from council that would be worded in such a way that if there is an escalation of this and from the, I guess, whoever the health minister or the health, Fraser Health, that we allow staff to carry out measures as appropriate, then you have council direction.
Effectively, that staff be authorized to deal with, I guess, locational or facility closures as may be needed or guided by other levels of government.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay, so I think that'll just be helpful. And that would also apply to our own council meetings. So we don't know what will happen in 2 weeks. So if there is a situation. Yeah, I know we're a meter apart. But would that also apply for council meetings? If it escalated, now you have some authority from council to make some decisions, and then we would deal with it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Arneson seconds. Just any discussion on that? Councillor Long?
Yeah, I mean, staff already pretty much have that authority, but I guess this is good, isn't it? Don't they? Yeah.
I think it helps staff to give that
Do we
direction.
have hand sanitizer stations at all our facilities? And if not, can we up that? And of course, the wash your hands, be smart.
Information and additional, I guess, supplies are being deployed as we think is necessary, so yes.
Yeah, I think that's important. I went into a supermarket the other day and there was no hand sanitizers anywhere, and people are grabbing buggies and so forth. And to seem, we may as well just do the obvious, right?
Yeah, I think do what we can. Thank you. Councillor Kunst?
Do we have a good stock of toilet paper?
Can I borrow a roll?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to call the question on I-1. Carries unanimously. Is there any other business?
Your Worship, that would include old newspaper just for...
Okay, old newspaper, yeah. Councillor Long, did you have anything, or was that the other question? Okay, now at this point we'll be moving to F7. So, Councillor Wood, I'll just get your mic on. Just hang on. There you are.
Yeah, he's getting well used to this, Ms. Bowers, so I'll be declaring a conflict. Do you need an explanation as to why? You've got it? Okay, thank you.
All right, clear the queue. Okay, this is a motion for receipt as a good report. I appreciate it. Do we need a motion? Move receipt, Councillor Long, second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that this report found that there is insufficient heritage integrity of the subject resources to warrant a recommendation for retention. Can people in the audience or who are interested in this get copies
Yep,
of this report?
It's available online through the agenda
process. Is it online?
Process. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No further discussion on F7. I'll call a question on F7. Carries. Councillor Long opposed. And so motion to terminate. Terminate. Councillor Davis, second. Councillor Kunst, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. Motion, meeting's now terminated.